Well, nobody knows how to spin it better than SEC, right? Nobody knows how to make excuses better than SEC. They're losing all these regular bowl games, and it's all, well, we didn't have our quarterback. We didn't have this guy. We didn't have that guy. It's a bowl game. Who cares? It doesn't matter. Anything outside of the CFP doesn't matter. Oh, well, come on. Georgia didn't have their starting quarterback. Everybody knows that if their starting quarterback, really the turnover nightmare that was their starting quarterback this season. And by the way, that was not an excuse for Florida State. Let's not forget that. None of that was an excuse for Florida State. Florida State had 10 people that ended up saying, well, forget this. I'm going to go to the NFL. Florida State had a bunch of other kids go ahead and decide to transfer out. And none of that was an excuse when Georgia ran through them. I had people literally in my DMs telling me to get on my knees and cleanse myself because of that football game. But Georgia loses. Not only do they get in with a backup quarterback, with 2 losses, mind you, and instead of undefeated Florida State, not only do they get in with their backup, not only do they get in as an SEC champ, not only do they get the bye, not only do they have a couple of losses, but then when they lose the football game, it's, well, you know what really happened was, really? We're not going to do that. We're not going to play that game. We're not going to pretend that the bowl games don't matter, because if the SEC was dominating the Big Ten the way the Big Ten has been dominating the SEC fan would not be quiet about how they're still the most dominant, how the wrong teams got into the college football playoff. We had to sit around and listen to SEC people say that Ole Miss should have got in, say that Alabama should have got in, say that South Carolina should have got in. By the way, it got so bad that at one point on NCAA.org, the official website of the NCAA, they had it wrong. They literally had the SEC as 5-2 when they were 4-3, and they didn't make the correction until later on. That's how bad it has been. That's how biased it has been. They were given a win that they didn't even have. It's just terrible. And, the common fan gets sick of it. Look, I don't have any disdain towards the SEC. I know that SEC fan and SEC media, they hear my stuff, they hear my commentary, and they go, dude, you're just as biased as everybody else. That you claim that their bias is real, but you clearly have an agenda and you have a bias too. I don't care if the SEC is the best conference in the country or not. I really don't care if the Big 12 is, the ACC. I've been saying for years that really what it amounts to is best team. You look at the years that Clemson was dominant, including a year that they meleeed Alabama 44-16 in the college football playoff. The ACC wasn't prolific. They weren't doing anything special. They had maybe one other good team every year. But Clemson was a truly great football team. And that's really what that amounts to. We need to stop with the idea of conference. And I know that conference is a big thing because it allows you to have some sort of unity, right? If your team isn't that great, you can still rely on your conference champion to maybe go in and win a playoff or a championship. And it makes you feel like you're still a part of it. And I get that. And that's fine. But I'm not going to push that the SEC is having a phenomenal season when they weren't. You see, every year they're given this big lead by the Associated Press, by the coaches poll. They get all these teams that are in, and they get this amazing push. So as the season progresses, and then we get into the first college football playoff ranking, it's, well, so-and-so played this ranked team and they won. What is that win or loss going to mean even a couple of more weeks down the road? I talked about at the beginning of the season how Florida State losing to Georgia Tech was not an upset. To me, it wasn't an upset because it was a brand new season. These teams were very different from last season, especially Florida State, and look how it turned out. That win and loss for either team really proved to be nothing. All Georgia Tech did was expose who Florida State really was at the beginning of the season. And Georgia Tech was just as mediocre as that win over Florida State would suggest, because as bad as Florida State was, they should have won that game by a lot more. But Florida State was given this head start. They were given this jump. Why? A, they're Florida State. B, it was kind of a my bad from the season prior, right? That's really what that amounted to. That was, our fault, bro. We're sorry. We're not going to do that again. Our bad. So what it amounts to is preseason polls meaning nothing. Polls before week 8 meaning nothing. And I've said it over and over and over again. If we're going to do polls, we shouldn't have them before week 8. And I really don't agree with the idea of polls, because I want a playoff system where there is no voting left. They are talking already about not giving a bye week to the conference champion. Why are they doing that? Because none of the conference champions did anything. That's why. Clemson lost right out of the gate to Texas. Ohio State ended up throttling Oregon. Arizona State, we'll get into the controversy of that game here in a little bit. But at the end of the day, what did the conference champion do? And, to me, this is just symptomatic of why we have an extended playoff. And I get so tired of all these people. Well, the regular season still has to mean something in college football. When does it not? If anything, the regular season means even more now, especially towards the end of the year. And I think it's phenomenal that you can get in with 1 or 2 losses now instead of making these teams go undefeated every single year. You are literally asking teams to be perfect. And even then, perfect was not good enough. So if perfect isn't good enough, then why create a system in which perfect has to matter? If we're voting on the ballet here, if we're treating it like it's a pageant, then why would perfection even begin to matter? So we take the voting completely out of the equation and we leave stuff like that out of the way. Because with a playoff system, Florida State would have got in. In Florida State's defense, all those players would have stayed for a college football playoff game. And their running back would have stayed for a college football playoff game. And the play calling would have been significantly different for a college football playoff game than it was in the ACC championship, where Florida State was basically just trying to get by. They were letting their defense do the job, and they were doing just enough on offense so that way they could win the game. That's it. That's what they were doing. How people didn't understand that concept still kind of blows my mind, to be honest with you. It is what it is. Now, in terms of Texas and Arizona State, look, I can understand where everybody is upset about what they believe should have been a targeting call at the end of that football game. All right. And I get that a lot of people believe that it gave Texas the opportunity that they did in order to stay and win that football game. Folks, let's not forget the play that Arizona State made where Brody came in and literally ducked down his helmet and then came up with his helmet and then speared the quarterback. Okay, we're not going to call that football and then get mad about another non-call, because both of those should have absolutely been called. If you've made it this far, you need to know something about me. I am not biased. I call it like I see it. In Arizona State, let's not forget that they got down big early in that football game. And for the most part, in the beginning of that football game, Scatterboo was being shut down. Now, he eventually became the offense for Arizona State. But that defense still doesn't get enough credit for what they accomplished. And even then, in overtime, they were not able to stop Texas. Arizona State had plenty of opportunities, and they could not win the football game. That was, look, if anything, that's a football game that'll probably get reviewed, and we're going to see some rule changes going into next season. I guarantee you on that. I mean, does anybody remember Mike Tomlin talking about, the player safety initiative and how they were looking at that Pittsburgh defense and all that stuff? I mean, there was part of it that was going on with that. It wasn't the whole story. It is what it is. But what I'm saying here is that was a scary game to watch. I mean, if anything, the NCAA is probably going to go back and look at that football game and go, we can't allow this. Not right now, we can't. The refs, for the most part, were just letting them play. I know that people have a disdain for the SEC, and I know you're tired of the SEC, and I know that you feel that now with Texas being in there, they're getting SEC calls. And it wasn't just that one play by Arizona State. There were a couple of others that should have been called, and they weren't as well. You have got to remember those plays too. And Arizona State dug themselves into a hole that was exceptionally difficult to get out. At the end of the day, it's really on them, and they have nobody to blame but themselves. That's really all there is to that. Now, I'm not saying that call didn't have an impact on the outcome of that football game, because it certainly did. But there were other calls that were missed that could have gone against Arizona State that were very similar, that could have also had an additional impact on the game. So there's that. In terms of Notre Dame, Georgia, look, everybody keeps saying that Notre Dame dominated Georgia. Defensively, yes. Obviously, the huge play at the beginning of the second half. Special teams played pretty good, even though they, had some penalties there right at the beginning of the football game, first quarter. They were really going after the punter because it was his first start, and they'd been known for that anyways, right? So they were going after the punter like crazy, and a couple of running into the kickers, right? So some mistakes could have really cost them early on in that football game. Offensively, Notre Dame has not been great so far in the college football playoff. Defensively is where they've been phenomenal. That's what that amounts to. Offensively, they've been literally able to do just enough. Defensively, that's where they've carried him. Now, here's the thing. I don't have a problem with it because the run game has really started to pick up too. The statistics aren't going to necessarily reveal it, but I think they need to stick with it more. And I've always said, if you've got a decent quarterback, a solid run game, a good team around that QB, and a phenomenal defense and some pretty good special teams play, you get basically an all-around football team, you're going to win some games. And for anybody saying that the SEC now all of a sudden has had this down year and all that, you weren't saying that before. And let's keep it a buck. While you're telling everybody that Notre Dame hadn't played anybody, they beat A&M, and now they beat your conference champion. Your backup quarterback is not an excuse, because it wasn't an excuse for Florida State. And to be honest with you, like I said, there would have been, if there were turnovers like that, which, by the way, a lot of them happened in the red zone, right? You had the fumble by Georgia, because, it wasn't like Georgia wasn't moving the football. But if they were turning the football over like that with their backup, let's be honest, Beck wouldn't have been much better, okay? The fact of the matter is, Notre Dame defensively made some really big plays, and that was why they won that football game. And the deciding play was the kickoff return for a touchdown at the beginning of the second half. That was the decisive play for that football team in terms of scoring, because otherwise Georgia was never really out of it. I'll be honest with you. I'm surprised that Notre Dame has made it this far. But I've said all along that I think that Marcus Freeman is a better football coach than Brian Kelly, and he's already proven that. And Kirby Smart, it's rare that it happens, but he got out coached in that football game. That's plain and simple. But also, his guys really, they didn't always execute. But I think Georgia is probably going to change their quarterback situation going into next season. I think they're good at running back. If they're able to hold on to the running backs, if they're able to hold on to that defense, if, they're able to, pretty much keep the offensive line, maybe make some adjustments there, they'll still win, 11, 12 games next season and be right back in the CFP. I mean, that's all there is to it. I don't think Georgia's going anywhere anytime soon. Not with the consistency of Kirby Smart as your head football coach. I don't see him going anywhere because he's got such an amazing setup right now. But, I mean, You never really know, right? I mean, Brian Kelly did what he did at Cincinnati, and then he turned around and did it again at Notre Dame. So, none of us ever really know what's going to happen. But I just think that with the way that he has everything right now with Georgia, I don't really see him going anywhere. I'm just keeping it a buck. I'm surprised Texas has made it this far. Sark has been really inept in some of the bigger games, big game situations, almost blew the game against Arizona State. Honestly, Clemson shouldn't have been in that game at all at the end. There should have never been any doubt, right? But they've left some doubt. They've been kind of able to skate by. They've had some big leads, and then they've kind of blown them. The further this thing goes, you can't do that against Ohio State. I'm going to tell you that much right now. The way that they're playing, the confidence that they're playing with. And again, Ohio State, perfect example of conference champion doesn't necessarily make you the best football team. And I said at the beginning of the season, when the initial game happened between Oregon and Ohio State, that wouldn't happen again. That I thought Ohio State would win in a rematch, and that's exactly how it went down. So there's that. No NBA today, for the record. I haven't been watching the NBA. It's insufferable. I have pretty much given up on it. I mean, the playoffs I'll probably watch if I get a chance, but it's not something I've been keeping up with this season. And, part of it is because, of all the other stuff I've been dealing with. But, I try so hard to watch the NBA, and it's just so unwatchable. It's just the Euro invasion and the way that they changed the rules to better themselves in the Olympics and the way that it allowed the Europeans to come in. Because it used to be, Tony Kukoc and Vlade Divac and all these other guys would have to come and adjust to the NBA game. Now there's no adjustment whatsoever, and the NBA has been trying to play catch up with all the farm leagues and systems and all that for a while, and they just haven't yet. And it's just, I'm sorry, standing around the three-point line and dribble drive on every play is just not entertaining. I miss multiple styles of offense. I miss multiple styles of defense. I miss multiple strategies. I miss coaching being important. It is what it is. All right. Guys, for anybody who's been keeping up, I am on day 32 sober, but I've still been having some crazy anxiety attacks. I've been having some dehydration. I had 10 IVs put in me in about a 4-day period. Despite all the water that I've been drinking, it's been insane. Gatorade, just pushing the water. I've been drinking about a gallon of water a day. It's been nuts. And I've been drinking about one thing of Gatorade Light a day. It's been pretty crazy. I haven't been able to work a lot, obviously, because of everything. Medication they had me on has got me feeling really woozy. Found out some stuff about my heart. As a matter of fact, they're going to do a stress test, a nuclear stress test on my heart coming up here before too long. There's just a bunch of other things, but, hopefully I'm getting through just, one at a time. You know what I mean? One at a time. So, all right, everybody, I am Drew Duncan, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. It's all at Drew Duncan Radio, TikTok, the RL Drew Duncan, the real Drew Duncan. Obviously, if you're seeing me here on YouTube, you know where I'm at. It's easy to find my podcasts, wherever you're listening to podcasts, iTunes, iHeart, Google, Spreaker, Deezer, etc. Wherever you're listening, I am there. Guys, everybody stay safe. I know there's a big blizzard blowing in a lot of places right now. There's been tornadoes, all kinds of madness and craziness. God be with all the victims down in Louisiana, Vegas, Target. There's been a lot of madness in the world. Everybody, please stay safe. Take care of yourselves. Have a wonderful day and or night.